Good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Evans. I'm with Patriot One, and we're here today to talk about some thoughts that are very important to a lot of our fans in stadiums, a lot of our customers in stadiums and spectator environments. And that's finding the right balance between securing fans and providing fan safety, as well as providing an excellent fan experience. And so what we're going to talk a little bit about today is key considerations for all companies to think about when they start trying to find this balance between patron safety and patron experience. To start off with, a little bit about who we are. We're a company called Patriot One Technologies, and we believe in finding that right balance and creating an outstanding patron experience while creating an outstanding patron security. These two things should go hand in hand. We do this by leveraging innovation in all sorts of very interesting areas, our experience in delivering solutions for customers, and an approach where we work together with those customers to take them on their journey, because this is not a flash cut. This is indeed a journey that has to be an architected solution for each unique stadium or live venue. When we think about the kinds of questions that one would ask a solution provider, or the kinds of questions that we get all the time, there's all sorts of different areas that talk to operations, they talk to the fan experience, they talk to the degrees of protection, and finding the flexibility and balance to integrate into your existing solutions. We're going to talk a little bit about each of those this morning and sort of discuss each one in its own right. When we think about friction and this idea of friction, I spent a lot of my time in the cybersecurity world, in the high-tech world, and what we constantly see is a repeated set of behaviors and a bit of a headbutting that occurs between, for argument's sake, the marketing organizations and the security organizations. This headbutting doesn't have to exist. On the one side, you have the marketing organizations who are constantly looking to be competitive and provide a better experience for their fans, for their spectators, right? Increase their revenue, provide differentiated value in a competitive world where there's more competition for the same consumer dollar, and make sure that consumer has an excellent experience when they come to the stadium, for example. On the other side, you have security. We've got an increasing world of threats, unfortunately, in the world today. We've got issues with privacy concerns, and protecting personal data. There's always concerns about hacking and weapons, entering into the arena. And we're seeing, unfortunately, a crisis situation around weapons. But at the same time, there's always pressure for increasing profitability and cost pressures. And so on the one hand, we're trying to accelerate new applications and new services for our customers. On the other hand, we actually have to do that in an environment that is secure and protected for those customers. Typically, these two things are at loggerheads with each other because there's a group that's trying to accelerate fast and a group that's trying to kind of tap the brakes and make sure it's done well and secured. So when you talk to your vendors, work with them to really understand, do they have that balance in mind? And do they have the tools in place that they can actually guide you to make sure that you're addressing both sets of needs, not one at the risk of the other? When we think a little bit about patron experience and patron security and finding that balance between the two, oftentimes people talk about just the entry into the door. And they'll think about things like walk-through metal detectors and weapons detection, for example. That's a singular application. But we live in a digital world. And historically, these kinds of technologies have been very, very physical in nature. There's people, security guards, there's walk-through metal detectors, and oftentimes people don't think about the plethora of data that's available to us long before the patron actually enters the stadium, where we can actually enhance their experience from day one, but also gather information that can help us provide a better patron screening experience on the way in the business. So for example, when people are doing reservations or they're talking about things on social media, that's indicators of what is important to that patron so we can actually customize and tailor their experience. But more importantly, for the security individuals, about potential early warnings about risks and threat. And therefore, as the people approach the building, they get from 100 miles away to 100 feet away. We also have intelligence about the crowd, who's there, who's bought tickets, who's in the environment. And we can start to do things like facial recognition to detect these individuals and either positively direct them in one direction or negatively pull them off to the side, make sure there isn't a risk or threat. Upon entry, when we talk about patron screening, well, the topic of the day right now seems to be very much about weapons detection. There's so much more that's involved in the main thing here being patron screening and patron security. And that includes things like, can I speed up the ticketing? Can I speed up health screening? Can I do things like RFID scanning so I can actually provide automated ticketing as well as weapons detection? Can I identify VIPs and take them in the right direction? So there's all sorts of different approaches that can be brought together onto a singular platform to actually enhance both of these. And as someone advising you what to think about with your customers or with your vendors, ask them about their approach. And are they thinking about the problem holistically, or are they simply providing a single box to address a single problem? Let's stop and pause for a minute here. There's this, and to quote the infamous Gilda Radner, what's all this I hear about? AI in this case. A cautionary note that I'd say to everyone, having been in this cybersecurity industry and the AI industry and SaaS industry for a long time, is don't be bamboozled. Don't buy the snake oil around AI. AI is important, but AI is very complex. And there's a lot of people who are sprinkling the words AI and machine learning and things like that all over their solutions and all over their marketing materials. I almost expect to go to the grocery store one of these days and find a big box of Tide detergent that says now with AI on it. It's being sprinkled around because people are trying to drive traffic to their website and they don't fully understand how AI is typically used or should be used in a pragmatic way to actually deliver value. AI is complex, right? You have the engines that do the parsing of information, but you need access to unique data for the problem you're trying to solve. And you need applications that sit on top of that. They're uniquely designed for the problem you're trying to solve. Most companies fail because they don't have all three of these layers, but they still sprinkle in, we have AI. So really dig into what does the company mean by AI? And more importantly, how does it fit to your specific and unique application? When we think about innovation in the marketplace, I think it's important to understand where we are in terms of patron screening and where we're going in terms of patron screening as an industry. Let's start with an analogy to kind of put things in context. Most folks on this call will be familiar with the original flip phone, right? It made phone calls. You could actually text on it, but you had to hit like the button 3 times to get the letter C. It wasn't most convenient for anything other than making phone calls. But then we kind of transitioned to a new platform or a new vehicle, which created a whole new opportunity for a new level of innovation, the smartphone. For those of you who remember the first smartphones, they didn't have a camera in them. You had to type with one finger to do any texting. You could surf the web, you could do some text, and you could only do personal emails. And that was about it. Fast forward 15, 16 years, and all of a sudden we're on to, for example, the Samsung 10 or the iPhone 12, and you've got all sorts of different integrated capabilities. It will never cease to amaze me how when I book a flight and I get an email, that reservation is automatically put in my calendar, right? And then it's already sending information to my Google Maps about what time I need to leave and what my route is to the airport. This integrated kind of capabilities only occurred because we had to get onto a new platform that had the ability to evolve with us. Now, challenge is where we are in the industry with patron screening today is on the left-hand side, like the flip phone, we have the walk-through metal detector. Very effective at what it does. It's been around for 20 plus years or so. Some would even say it's a little bit of a boat anchor. It does a good thing, a good value for what it's supposed to do. However, it's kind of sort of getting towards the end of its life, like the flip phone. The new platforms that are doing patron screen type capabilities do integrate AI, but AI specifically for a specific outcome, okay? And when you think of AI and someone comes along and says, well, we have 650 guns in our library for AI, it's irrelevant. You need to think about the patron experience and the patron screening and the kinds of data that you want to correlate, because every single gun has a hardened metal barrel. It has a return spring. They're all the same in terms of what you're screening for in order to determine, is this a weapon or is this not? So it's not about 650 guns. It's about all the other data insights that you can bring together to accelerate that patron experience. So when we start looking at things at this level, we're probably at the maturity level as an industry overall, everyone, right? At the same level as, say, iPhone 3, iPhone 4, or something like that. But where we're going is with the platforms that we've put in place, you can start to address the approach, you can start to address the entry, and you can start to address the experience on the inside of the venue in the stadium. Doing things like not only threat and weapons detection, but I can also start integrating ticketing. So I don't have one line for tickets, one line for metal detection, one line for alcohol detection. I can integrate that all into the same platform. I can use the same insights to do things around crowd intelligence, better merchandising and marketing, these kinds of things. Think about this a little bit more. Let's talk a bit about sort of the state of the industry today. And again, this is the state of the industry. Walk-through metal detectors, right? On average, 100% of people are screened. 30-40% might get secondary screening, about 500 people per hour, 100% contact in a world of COVID. Not necessarily a good thing. In a lightly cluttered environment, that's what the typical person would enter into a stadium with, you're probably going to reduce those numbers significantly. But the challenge here is the balance. And we'll talk about balance in a moment. Don't be, again, back to kind of snake oil marketing around AI and things like that. Don't be fooled when you see data where people say 3,000 people per hour and this detection rate and this alert rate. It's not that simple. It's much more complex. And these things all interact with each other, right, in balance. You can accelerate one, but the other is going to have to trade off in return. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the state of industry today, while it's not perfect, maybe we are, to use our analogy, at the iPhone 3 or 4 level as an industry. We'd all like to be at iPhone 12, right? But it's much better than the flip phone. And so many companies are starting to adopt this technology. Many stadiums, live entertainment venues are starting to adopt the technology because they're getting onto a new platform that can then grow as their business grows and their business needs grow. If we continue this thinking about what does the future look like any platform, like our analogy of iPhone 1 to iPhone 12, things will then start to get better. And just like at the iPhone, when things they added a camera to it, that caused things like Snapchat and video sharing and Instagram to occur. And so all sorts of applications we hadn't even thought of were now available to be placed onto a platform. As things like Snapchat occurred, well, all of a sudden you got better and better cameras, multiple cameras, these sorts of things. So the hardware and the software becomes like this virtuous circle that keeps enhancing itself. The same thing's happening in the world of patron screening. While the primary focus and the main thing is on weapons detection in the environment we live in today, we have built a platform that can actually not only address that weapons detection capabilities, but it's going to improve in terms of its throughput, its efficacy, its detection rates, its alert rates, and these kinds of things. So let's talk a little bit more about balance here, okay? Everyone can dust off your high school calculus books if you'd like, right? Hopefully that doesn't cause anyone's brain to hurt, right? But let's understand every single stadium, every single venue, every single facility, every single sports environment is different. Even within a single environment, you can have multiple different doors and gates that are going to be different from each other. And there's a lot of factors that come into equation here. So asking your vendor the question like, what's your alert rate? What's your detection rate? What's your throughput rate? Is not the right question, right? Because all these things are traded off. You know, you can actually have a much higher throughput rate with some of the technologies that are in the marketplace, but you're going to have to turn your detection rate down very, very low to the point where it's almost pointless having it. You might want to turn up your detection rate very, very high because you want to catch small knives, and we can catch small knives down to 2 inches, right? But you might get a slightly higher alert rate, which may be okay depending on what your security operations are. So when you start to think about the equation rate, you have to balance the alert rate, the detection rate, the throughput rate, the security operations model. Do you have security guards? Do you not? Do you want it to be autonomous and you'd like it to alert back to a central facility where I can then track individuals with video cameras? What's your costs, right? You may have one entrance where you've got 5 doors, but your throughput in that entrance only requires one entryway for people for weapons detection. But for aesthetics, you may want to have 5. What does your venue look like, and how do you trade off cost versus performance? Also, then we talk a bit about the environmentals. A simple example here is one stadium that we're deployed at. They've got a lot of streetcars, electric streetcars. Those streetcars throw off a lot of electromagnetic interference. That kind of thing will interfere with walk-through metal detectors. It'll interfere with all sorts of advanced technologies and all sorts of different technology. Now, can your system be tuned using the AI engines to overcome some of those environmental factors that may negatively impact the situation, right? And then, of course, we have the patron experience. Ultimately, we want that experience to be very, very good, but not at the right balance of my costs versus my throughput versus my alert rates and detection rates. All these things have to be looked at for every single gate and every single stadium, and that's one of the things that we like to do with our customers to make sure we do this right. Let's not just flash cut a stadium and have a problem. Let's really understand this and roll things out in a very pragmatic and intelligent way based on how you wish to run your business. So when we think about flexibility, there's other things that come into mind on flexibility here, right? Indoors, outdoors environments. I'm actually sitting in a stadium today, and they like to do a lot of activities in an outdoor environment. They will do things for the fans. They're seeing an open concourse area, open plaza area. Can your technologies actually withstand the weather, right? Whether it's 30 degrees below zero, or you're sitting in Florida where the humidity is very high and it can cause sensor devices to fail. Are there a lot of vibrations around? Vibrations will significantly affect the efficacy of things like walk-through metal detectors. Can the solution be very covert or customizable so it looks like my environment? It doesn't look like a big walk-through metal detector. I may have a very opulent environment and I want it to look and fit. right? Single lane, dual lane, multi-lane, so I can cover a whole large entryway. So being very fit and flexibility to both the business environment and the customer experience, as opposed to a one size fits all. Again, coming back to this idea of one size fits all, we've talked a lot about these things like traffic rates and alert rates, but this EMI spike is the example I just talked about with the electric streetcars as they ran by a certain scenario. So is the system adjustable and tunable to deal with these kinds of unique situations for your environment to make sure that you're optimizing that equation we talked about earlier? And of course, making sure that we do things like adhere to the security standards, the DHS Safety Act, NIJ, ASTM kind of standards are minimum requirements for this kind of technology in order to ensure that your stadium can actually meet Safety Act requirements also. So as we think about this a little bit, we've talked about some of these things, but integration to your security operations, integration to your business operations. Some secure organizations we work with, they have a centralized security environment. They want everything to be very autonomous. So that's okay. So if somebody does walk through the environment with a weapon, does the system have the ability to track that individual as they move throughout the environment and perhaps geolocate them on a map so you can actually intercept them as part of your security operations? Or do you wish to prevent weapons and other technology or other issues coming into the building, and you'd actually like to push your perimeter farther way out onto the sidewalks? So that ability to integrate with security operations as opposed to being a unique standalone siloed application and fit into how the business is run today. Further, I mentioned this earlier, data and data standards. Now, data standards themselves, security standards themselves, like the DHA Safety Act, NIJ, ASTM, any local regulations, such as gaming laws, privacy laws, all have to be considered. And so ask your vendors where they stand against these kinds of things and have them show you the data, have them show you the reports so that you can actually deploy with confidence and know that you're not putting your business at risk. Similarly, data information to allow you to draw out the insights for planning and security operations design. I should be able to go into any one of these systems and draw out all sorts of insights around exactly how many people walked through, what kind of weapons they had, what kind of alerts you got, these kinds of things, so you can fine tune to then manage that best customer experience. So ultimately, this is about finding the right balance between many considerations. This is not simply a situation of saying, let's go buy another walk-through metal detector and let's set it at level 2. Because there's so much more about what the fans are experiencing in the future. The fans are coming out of a COVID environment where they want to return back to the stadiums. They want to return to the games they love. They want to return to seeing the teams that they've cheered for and are looking for that return to that experience once again. This is a prime opportunity to rethink security operations as we start to slowly ramp up and to start to think about what is the best next wave of how I want to actually engage my fans and give them a much better experience upon their return. So thank you for listening today. Really do appreciate the time. Really do appreciate being invited to speak today. And please call us if we can help you in any way, shape, or form. Thank you.